All right. So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do on Monday afternoons at 3 p.m. Eastern to figure out what the future for smart buildings is all about. So great to have you with us today. In case you're wondering who we are listed on mondaylive.org. Also to point out that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Keep that in mind, please. Please do post comments, questions, and other sort of interactions on the Zoom chat. That makes these sessions much more interactive and much more valuable for all. And in case you want any of the links or any of the information that presented on the slide deck, it's also available on mondaylive.org. So head over there. So this is the last Monday of June, where we have been talking about this notion that automation is not the same as smart. So we'll continue that just for one more week, and then we'll move on to another subject, TBD. And so our agenda, normal chit chat, and then on the automation equals to smart, we're going to do a recap of what happened last week at RealCom, and just open it up for open discussions and comments from the audience. So looking forward to that. But before we dive into that, I'm going to hand it over to the Sinclairs, the two Sinclairs.
The Sinclair pair.
Yeah,
That's right.
What's going on?
Well, as we were talking about, that's the only way to close the talent gap is to have children and force them to come into the industry. So you guys all got to get going on that theme.
Been there, done that.
Good stuff. Okay, lots going on. I think I have to start right away with kudos to the group that all went to Tampa. The live stream was amazing. I think it was way better than if you hadn't have been able to do it. We had you online like hours after the live stream finished and started moving you around on social media. We got good response. It seems that both C4SB and Monday Live have kind of come out of the closet, and they become a real thing. And I think a lot of what I was hearing is that now I understand what it is you guys are doing. I think a little bit it was because that's what we finally found out what it was we were doing, and because you were forced to go to a deadline and make a presentation, you did a good job. But anyway, kudos to you all. Well done. The other message that I got out of there is the Linux-based cloud native open. That is just a great message, and it just highlights the need for us as an industry to understand this new community and become part of this community, because it is part of the fabric that we need to bring in to our industry. The other one, we got some articles. Of course, Carrie's here. She was at the Talent Gap session, and I think that's always the problem, trying to get enough people into the industry. We've also got an IBcon over there integrating thermostats with BACnet, and I think that's a lot about what we're going to be moving forward, is just integrating these standards. And I think more and more we're seeing the value of standards, that anything that in the past we put into a standard, no matter how funny and clunky it is, it's easier to bring in a standard than it is to bring in some unique addition of a interface that somebody has done. So I think we're heading in the right direction, trying to move our industry towards this cloud native computing foundation. Is there anything you want to add to that, Carrie? Or?
no, that's good.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay, back to you, Anto.
And yeah, and we'll obviously talk a lot more about RealCom, but appreciate the reaction. Appreciate that you were able to turn it around into some articles pretty quickly. So great. And also, I think we should give a big shout out to BIG, the Building Intelligence Group that actually organized that live cast. So
Yeah,
thank you, Brad, and that team. And we're also going to be doing a follow up with them doing a webinar basically on a similar message with the BAG network. So looking forward to that sometime in the next few weeks. So I had a couple of things that caught my eye this past weekend. One is this article on Fast Company about the age of AI optimized buildings. Now, obviously, the important thing here is that it was in Fast Company, which is not a trade magazine, although I'm not sure they exist anymore. But Fast Company is a magazine that is focused on technology in the general sort of in the general world. So just sort of seeing that is very interesting. If you read it, it's obviously it's been supported by some of the well-funded AI companies in the industry, but sort of reading past that, the message that this is happening it came across very, very clear, and I was really sort of pleased to see that coming from that media outlet. The second thing that I saw that caught my eye is this memory. So announcing this a report on AI for smart commercial buildings. And what sort of specifically intrigued me and why I put that question mark there is that they've put scope of what they call smart buildings, specifically to do with the more tactical stuff, and that's all good, but they've specifically put construction out of scope and prop tech and real estate management out of scope. And it's kind of an evolution. I think we're slowly sort of realizing that the market is actually much more holistic than that. But I brought it up here because I think it's just a progression, and I think we need to sort of be aware of that, be aware that it's actually a much more significant market that we can potentially touch if we go about it right. So I'll probably reach out to James McHale and get his comments on that. But that was sort of my thoughts. Sort of moving on, Rick, do you want to recap on this just briefly on?
Yeah, first of all, I want to appreciate everybody's work and getting everything ready for Realcomm and kind of going with us on this theme of if your data is invisible, AI doesn't exist, and automation does not equal smart. And it seems like those messages and the other ones that we delivered were very well received, and I think that's a great indication of what the market is wanting to hear more about, and what they need. I'm going to say we need to provide more leadership about. So going forward, I think this was a really great attendance. First of all, great reaction, great follow up, and again, I think really good evidence of the message was on target. Could be wrong, but it seemed like it was on target.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Rick. So this link board as normal, just skip past that. Any other news or thoughts? Any other reactions from those that were in Tampa? Tracy,
Sorry, go ahead, Tracy. Oh,
you go ahead.
Couple of things I think that was interesting from my perspective. Talking to several of the exhibitors, they thought the attendance was down, but I didn't really get that sense. So I'm not sure. Maybe it was just they weren't going through the exhibits and more on the conference stuff. But several of them thought that the attendance was a little bit down, but that seems subjective.
I heard the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I think from the vendors that were on the show floor, that was consistent.
From the exhibitors in particular. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, that was my only metric too. Not anyone else. I think the other one that is another confirmation that I got was that people really value the pre-con days. to the actual event days from a content perspective, from a technical presentation perspective, technical content. That I got a lot of feedback again saying that they really appreciated the pre-con days and the sort of things that we put on, and the others, of course, you know, the other pre-con events that was there. So they are getting obviously there was a lot more people I'd noticed in the pre-con day than I've ever seen in the past as well. Interestingly enough too. So
yeah, I had the same thing about pre-con as being really rich with thought leadership.
Yeah.
Less commercialism than the main part of the conference, which is interesting.
And Daniel's got a question there. If we think the attendees had a good experience from what you thought, my reply would be, I think so, for sure. I mean, again, just building on what it was. You know, I thought Tampa was a bit of an odd selection, but at the end of the day, it worked out all right. It was easy to get to, it was easy to get around. Public transport was good, and I really did like that session that the guy from the Tampa dev folks talked about, you know, what they're doing with Tampa and how that's going on. So I did like that. I thought like I said, location was good, conference was good, content was good, and I got that from a lot of the attendees. I was actually quite surprised how many people stayed on through to Friday. In fact.
Cool. Tracy, do you have anything to contribute? Just as a reaction.
Sorry, multitasking with lunch right now. No, I concur with pretty much everything Anna was saying. I would add that there are probably a higher than usual number of people who came up to us, to me, to one of us after about our session and made a comment and said they enjoyed it, and so, you know, that's always a good to get that positive affirmation, I think. Otherwise, I think Anno covered it pretty well.
So just a comment from Steve Dodd. It did. I mean, I tend to agree with part of his comment that some of the sessions that we heard in Realcomm, especially in the main part of the conference, really did come across as very commercial, and when it does, it's kind of very obvious, and felt that not to be as good, you know, as ideal.
Okay. I think that's a hallmark of Realcomm.
Although
Okay.
Tracy and I did have just other feedback. Tracy and I did have a funny, or I'm going to say it funny now. I had a funny experience at Realcomm. You want me to tell you the story?
Yes. Yes.
Go
ahead.
for it. Go for it.
So Tracy and I were on the conference floor, and we were talking about going. We were heading somewhere. Then we were full into discussion, and I told him I needed to go to the restroom, and he said, yeah, he needed to go as well. And we both went into the men's restrooms, and those of you know men's restrooms right along the line of urinals. So he took one end, and I took the other end. But there was this one man still in the middle of the in the restroom. But Tracy and I continued our conversation across the guy who was in the middle about whatever the subject we were talking about. As the guy in the middle finished up, his comment was, "Wow, I'm getting Monday Live in stereo. Who would have thunk?" And then he left. But we never knew who it was.
So if you are the stranger who was there and made that comment,
Put your hand up.
Yeah, put your hand up. Identify yourself. We'd like to know.
Speak up and win a prize.
And win a prize. Yeah, that was.
You don't have to, by the way. You don't have to.
That's okay.
Don't feel pressed.
You can be anonymous. It's fine.
Yeah, you can stay anonymous. That's for sure.
But it was interesting, just good feedback of, you know, people do listen to us. And I did actually, there were several people that I came up to me.
I think one of the interesting things is the fact that neither of us recognized the gentleman.
No, it was
and
just the back of his
yeah.
head.
So that was good to get that.
All right, let's move on, Dewey. Thank you for that.
Please.
Right, automation is not the same as smart. Just a little recap. This has been our sort of flow of this month. We're talking about understanding the problem and solution going forward, and then cloud native. And just to summarize those weeks, we talked about the problems being everything from we don't have a consistent understanding of what smart building is, to silos, to proprietary issues, to the fact that everybody's into data except not that available for buildings. And we need to move forward. In the second week, we talked about viable solution, which went all the way from commercial sort of issues in terms of cost of adoption to suitability for all stakeholders, to the sort of standardization and interoperability and open, which is very important to the sort of more technical sort of issues. So we talked about all of that in the second week. And then in the third week, we talked about basically what a cloud native solution looks like, the way we're thinking about things. And this is obviously the presentation that we gave, the core part of the presentation that we gave at RealCom. So you've seen all of these slides. And last week, the 8 of us, this is the 8th. Thank you for all of those folks. And I'm going to bring you online on as panelists in a moment. And we were there at RealCom. And these are just some pictures that we have from the room. So it was really a good session. So with that, I'm going to sort of throw it back to the floor to have an open discussion about what we learned. And why don't we start with Rick himself, who's this is billed as the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. So let's start with you. What was the big takeaway from your perspective?
Well, as I said earlier, I think that the idea of the agenda that we set out, the message format that we set out, the specific parts of the message were, a little bit not controversial, but there was a little bit of controversy around the way we were going to position it. But at the end of the day, it was well received, the presentation. So, and again, I believe that the fact that we're talking about open, that we're talking about the Linux Foundation, we're talking about cloud native, and that we're going to really be going forward, we're going to be leveraging those things even more into the market. Again, speaking as the coalition, I think that feedback and that reception to those messages were even better than what we'd expected. So I'll say the key thing I think was that there are more people that understand the value of the Linux, as Ken said earlier, the value of Linux, or Linux as can be pronounced, and what that could mean or will mean to our industry. I think that's better understood than maybe what we imagined. And so we can maybe run faster with that and more aggressively than maybe what we thought. That's my main takeaway.
At the same time, we identified somebody who's been in the industry for a very long time who never heard of Linux before, right? Wasn't that you and I having that conversation? Yeah.
So there was more than a few of those. But the concept of open and interoperable is something that so many people have believed in for a long time, that when you sort of bring Linux into the picture as the new open, the new flag carrier for all the concepts of open, people can rally around it pretty quickly, and they can learn about it really quickly. The other thing we saw during the show was that our feeling that steal this phrase, the cool kids are all doing IT Linux-based things. And there were a lot of young people at this show, and there were a lot of young people in our session. And sure enough, they really love the open message. And yes, they are doing IT-based things, and Linux is right in the center of it.
I had a couple of takeaways from that along that same line, Rick. And I think part of the challenge that we've had historically when we look at the efforts in the market over the years to create open interoperable, whether it be somewhere at the lower level in the stack, like BACnet and LawnWorks or whatever it might be, it always eventually got either associated with a single company's effort or started with a single company's technology or got hijacked by OEMs and companies along the way. And this industry has never seen an open initiative that has caught on and has as much momentum as the Linux movement has had over the last 10 years, let's say. So I think the timing of this, the message of open interoperable, I don't think anyone ever really poo-pooed on a whole lot. It was always the fact that it ended up proprietary somewhere. So the fact that we can get to Linux and Linux might be the new vehicle for open interoperable in our industry, I think is the perfect message right now for that. So that was the one takeaway. Now I've forgotten what the other one was. Go ahead, it'll come back to me. But I think that's the timing of this is really important piece of that whole thing.
Well, just on that, we didn't spend a ton of time on this, but as people go to start to learn more about what's going on in the Linux Foundation, they'll be pleased, not just with the fact there's 220,000 people that are contributing to CNCF and, you know, the sheer numbers of it, but they'll be, I think, pleased to see that what we're doing in this industry is mirrored by what's happening in other industries and other domains. And we're not necessarily behind. We might actually be a little ahead in, and oh, by the way, the fact that it's not dominated by one company, in a lot of other domains, whether it's manufacturing or farming or pharma, there is like one or two companies that are dominating all of the work. And so I hope we can continue to have this be a broad-based support, not dominated by, you know, a couple of companies.
I remember the other point I was going to make. I for the first time am feeling like, I won't say the battle is won yet, but the sheer momentum of us moving this into the Linux world, I think it's inevitable that it's going to open up. It's going to be based on these technologies. And, you know, at best, the only thing anyone or any entity can do is delay it, but it's going to happen. Or at worst, maybe is the way to say that. It's going to happen now. I'm feeling much more confident about that than I was, say, 6 months ago or a year ago when we started talking really seriously about this. I don't know. Does anyone else feel that way? Getting that?
Yeah, I think that kind of fits my feedback that I got from the folks too, which, by the way, not only did we have the folks in the restroom, the guy in the restroom, but we did have others who, if you remember, crossing the road to the Marriott, and there were guys who were just, you know, calling us out and saying what a great job we did and thought there was good content. And so that's kind of rare, you know, to have in these sort of sessions. But to your point, Tracy, I was getting the similar feedback, a lot of surprise about how far we've got and how far what we've defined. And I think there was a lot of surprise in the content. And in fact, I got a couple of comments about the content was extensive and deep and thorough, and which kind of surprised a lot of folks. I thought it was just going to be high level sort of, you know, concept stuff. But the depth of it was, everyone kept coming back to me, there's a lot of depth here, there's a lot of thought already, the structure, you know, everything. So some folks felt like, hey, how do we catch up and stuff, which does talk a little bit to the, you know, I know our Monday Live community is not a huge community, you know. I did get a lot of like, how do we find out more about that? And we do a lot on Monday Live. So it might circle back to the, you know, outreach thoughts at some point.
I agree.
Kerry, wondering if you, because I think you were there in the room, you were there at Realcomm, and you were looking at it from sort of more of a journalist perspective because you're with automated buildings. Could you share your thoughts about what you saw there? You're also relatively new to a lot of what's going on here, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I've obviously been watching the Monday Live things now for, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. So I've sort of seen it being built. And I think it was like already shared the realization that it's actually something now. And I think, you know, the only thing which I was, you know, spoken to Ken about is really, you know, it's almost like it's time to go somewhere else, if that makes sense. Like, it's like we've done the work here and, you know, I did some work looking at the CMCF and or CNCF, and like they have a conference in Utah in November. You know, my background in software would say to me that there is a couple thousand young builders in Linux that are going to be there looking for, you know, engineers love to solve problems, looking for an automated building problem or smart building problem, and your platform and their experience, and that it's the innovators, if that's made sense. I think that was a big thing that you all said at the end of the panel is, you know, what needs now is the innovators to come and actually start building with it, right? And I sort of had that concept that it's actually ready to be built on, and now it's just how do you safely get it into the hands of those builders that are going to try to push it and make it better and also innovate with it. I feel like, and that group or that trust of that can sort of be guardrailed here, but you know, it's almost like it's ready to be pushed off the cliff and learn to fly now. Yeah, I don't know that, you know, the whole 80-20 rule, I don't know if there's a lot of tinkering around that's going to add as much value as getting it out into the wild and seeing how it performs. And then the only other thing, which I think you and I spoke about too, was there was a guy that jumped up at the end because there wasn't a lot of time for questions, and there was clearly a lot of questions and engagement. And I thought the cost one was quite an interesting theme to sort of keep thinking about, of democratizing the platform so that small buildings and smaller things can actually do it, and it doesn't become such a, you know, a monopolistic acquisition to try to control prices in this market, and it still keeps to its roots. And, you know, and I think that's always going to be the balance between the commercial model that has to pay for the support of the platform and its continued improvements versus the reality of, as soon as it's valuable, someone wants to buy it and take it out of the market because it threatens their business. And so, you know, how that stewardship and ownership kind of progresses now. So that was my 10 cents.
Tom James just posted a comment. It's interesting. His view is that this cannot be hijacked because it is, by its very nature of being open source, that it's already in the public domain, so you can't hijack it. All you can do is be part of it. It's kind of the implication there.
Linux was hijacked. Let's be clear, right?
Yeah. There is a way you can. I'm sorry.
No longer, OpenAI is no longer a non-for-profit open source. It is now fully for profit, and Microsoft owns 40% of it. So
yeah. In other words,
tell me how it doesn't get hijacked. No.
In other words, everybody can be bought. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
There's a price. Everybody has a price, right?
Yeah.
We're going to keep it open for a long time.
Yeah.
But there's a perverse way you can think about it of how it can be hijacked. You can hijack it by just putting phenomenal features, functions, capabilities, applications, right? I mean, but that's a good thing. I mean, that's what you want people to do, right?
Yeah. But that's the momentum I think that you want. You want to be where the innovation is happening, because everyone is naturally attracted to that area, right? And then you're also seeing what people are doing before everybody else is. It's just that, you know, some of these things take a life of their own. I mean, for example, Python is really being used for AI. You know, so then it's sort of, you know, Linux might be great for this, but then if they're going to get into AI, you know, is it going to be Python developers that kind of take you that way? So I think it's exciting, but I think it's, you know, it's, again, just needs to get into the market so that we learn quickly what it can and cannot do, and then can decide how to make it better.
That's a really good point Kerry brings up, though, everyone. I think I don't know. I don't know that we want to overthink this thing, right? I mean, I would rather get what we've got out there, right, and have people start doing it. I don't want to get to the point where we're just overthinking and trying to make it better and better and just fine tuning it. Just put it out there, right?
I wonder if it's too late to get a session at CNCF that Carrie was talking about in November.
Well, one thing we thought we could do is reach out as a potential media sponsor and see if we can get some, a session or something where we can put one of you on it as part of, because when you look into some of the, if you go into the detail, you can start to see there's actually streams very similar to what you would see at maybe AHR, not as broad as, not kind of the commercial side of Realcomm, but more the AHR, where there's actually kind of a technical streams, and then maybe because there will be an automation of IoT built environment sessions that, again, we could be offering to put panels or some of our content or those videos into that stream, just to get exposure to it. And I'm sure that they would like to get the exposure of their conference to all of you and everyone on Monday Live as well, because this is where they're looking for their growth. No more fitness apps are required, right? we now got to get into the more technical stuff. So
I think you touched on an important part of this whole little tactic or strategy, and that is for us as stewards of the industry, so to speak, the OGs of our industry, to go there and say, A, there's an opportunity here. B, we need your help. 3, the opportunity for you guys is one of disruption level type opportunity here, and get that spinning in people's heads that, hey, I can go in this industry and really, this is the avenue to disrupt what's been going on for decades there. And maybe that would help catch a little fire there to get some others involved at looking at this that are outside of our industry and who are very familiar with that kind of a platform.
Yeah, our focus has always been that we've been reaching out to automated buildings and reaching out to people globally to let them make them aware of what we're doing. I think we have to expand our view and start reaching out to some of these other groups, these other communities. And I think that's a trend, is that we've always blinders, and now we have to kind of take a big look at the world, and we need to start going into these communities, which we're probably a little uncomfortable to go into, but I think they'll find us interesting. And again, kudos to you guys, because this is the first time we've actually had a living document that we can actually point to. And once you finish the elevator speech, just watch this video and you'll get an idea what I'm talking about. And we've got a lot of folks doing that. And that's good for automated buildings. That's good for Monday Live. It's good for C4SB. Everybody wants to get more.
I think if you stood up in front of that audience, Ken, to your point, and said, here's framework for what we want, now go code it for us.
Yeah. But then once you open that up, there's probably a whole bunch of other areas. Taking this course on AI at Stanford, and at the Python, and so there's other ways of actually achieving it, and how some interesting discussions about how the AI is going to be handled is some stuff there as well. So yeah, communications.
Well, I think someone put on the chat too, it's the genie's out of the bottle. That's one of the challenges, right? Is once it's out, you can't put it back in. So I think that thinking about it sort of strategically and then being able to react to it. But the big thing I was saying to Dad is that the challenge with the AI at the moment is, and it was come from the AI course I've been doing at Stanford, I just finished last week, is that it's very, generative AI is all the data we've already given to the world by accident. Where am I right now? Google knows, right? I gave that to them in return for having a great experience on my phone when I get lost. We will inevitably do the same thing as an industry. We will accidentally give it to generative AI, which will then do whatever it can do with it. So we do have to think, and this is cybersecurity and you know, so I do think there's these things which we kind of talk about, but when it's in the wild, you will suddenly find that it does things that you didn't think were possible because they don't know the constraints that you know, or they don't have the concerns that you do, that this doesn't go out any further, you know. So I think when at AHR used the example of the aquarium, that was what brought down an entire casino that we were working on in a previous role I had. You know, it's the same sort of thing. We won't know what will actually take down the platform until it's out in the world and someone's trying to hack it or break it or do something with it. And then we're going to be shocked, hopefully shocked, that it actually is better than we expected because someone's done it. So I think that's kind of the framework that I think we have to continue. Like, I guess what I would say is we stop with IBB, but now we start thinking about these other things that we're going to bump into, that you want to maybe have the stewardship group have some ideas of how you can put some constraints, and or the service companies or the integrators or the things that are going to do this for a building or do it for a brand, because it's not going to be us doing it, right? There's got to be teams of people now that are going to be using IBB that are going to then be supporting their customers. And I think that's those are some of the things that I kind of was bouncing around.
So Rick, and I know that you're having some technology challenges right now, but Rick is the one that's sort of leading the charge in terms of moving or getting the IBB and C4SB adopted within the Linux sort of ecosystem. Do you want to chime in on?
Sure. I think we wanted to get the feedback. We wanted to get through this last week. We've been getting good feedback from quite a few large companies and from individuals that have, you know, quite a bit of experience in the Linux Foundation. And I think that, you know, after some of the conversations that we all had amongst ourselves, based on the feedback that we got, I think we're going to definitely push forward with moving the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, or at least applying to become a project of the Linux Foundation. And I think that's just going to make sense. And the feedback and the work that's already been done, and all the feedback and the work, along with just the number of companies not being dominated by one, I think that fits really well with what they're looking to do. And then, you know, we'll see what the process entails, but that's our intent. And I, again, apologize for the little difficulties I'm having here technically.
So sort of reaching out. So after Realcomm, I think everybody's right that it's kind of a bit of a watershed, what happened last week. Sort of it changes quite a number of things. And I think we're all sort of saying the same kind of things, that we need to expand broaden the space a little bit, which is the talk about going to actually trying to present at CNCF. We're also talking with David Welts about doing the same into the ULI community, and also Kimon Onuma, who's the guy that's helping us on the BIM side. He's not just helping us; he's contributing a significant amount of knowledge and technology. It's all part of this architecture. He's encouraging us to go into several sort of new venues, which is potentially interesting. Obviously, we have to be careful that we don't spread ourselves too thin. We continue to give the message out there. David, do you want to just sort of comment a little bit about ULI, because I think that's going to come up in conversations in the next few weeks, and I'm not sure anybody knows much about ULI.
Sure. ULI is the Urban Land Institute. ULI.org is the website. The organization was founded back in the late 60s, early 70s, mostly by real estate developers. And it grew to be quite the community of real estate leaders and asset holders and investors who couldn't find any other conference or quorum where they could actually share their challenges with each other. In the same town, they're competitors, but if you're talking to somebody who's doing cold storage on the opposite side of the country,
you may have clients in common, and it can be extraordinarily helpful. And from there, ULI has grown into a very large global real estate industry organization. It is a not-for-profit, and they are based out of DC, but there's now a European committee and organization, as well as an Asia committee and organization. The conferences are in the spring and in the fall, and then if you're part of, you know, a more senior, older industry veteran, there are also what are called product councils, and the product councils are mostly around what they consider products. So multifamily, different building products, basically multifamily, retail, office, mixed use developments, infrastructure, goes on, affordable housing. There are lots of different councils, and I'm a vice chair of one of the two technology and real estate councils. So at the fall and spring meetings, there are general session meetings that cover all sorts of timely topics. And at those conferences, industry leaders from those respective cities get up and share their work and share their projects and share their challenges and victories. And then also there are a number of tours of local projects. And then there are also the council meetings. And so one of the features of these have historically been what are called forums, which are a deep dive half-day format around specific areas of interest. And in some cases, even though there's an infrastructure product council, there could be an infrastructure forum as well, where it's open to the entire populace of the conference attendees. And so along those lines, I led and started the data forums at ULI 2 years ago. The first one was in Dallas in the fall of 2022. Is that right?
All right.
No, 2021. And the bottom line here is that we feel that the ULI audience is growing in its understanding of the importance of the physical asset and the operation of the physical asset. Most of the time in ULI, the members are just caring about, with the building, they just care about their net operating income, their return on capital, and their hold time. And what they're realizing is, with the massive devaluation of office and the huge fluctuations in the market across multifamily, retail, and industrial, that better management of assets is crucial to maintaining profitability and returns on investment. And so this is where we see a greater interest in reporting and disclosure of building performance, but also doing facility and property management better and more efficiently to help lower the costs and increase returns. So with this in mind, we think the ULI audience would be open to hearing what the Monday Live and C4SB consortium has been working on. And there's definitely an audience within the larger organization that this is knowledge that they're seeking and probably can't find it other places. So we feel there is an opportunity there to share this message and to start socializing it with the actual decision makers who sign off on capital plans and sign off on portfolio-wide tools like what we're talking about. How is that, Anto?
That's fantastic, David. Any thoughts or reaction from the group here?
Sounds aligned to me.
Yeah, clearly does.
Excellent.
Cool.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Make it clear. I agree. Well aligned.
Thank you, Anna.
I think your point though about we only have so few resources that we have to pick where we can have the most impact, and so that would be the only thing that would enter into that.
Yeah, and part of that, what's going through my mind, I think the idea of presenting at CNCF type event is a great one, and eventually we'll do that. To me, it's a question of when. To me, it's not, that conversation is not so much about if the technology is ready, it's about whether we can make what would need to be an overwhelming case that almost like the whole world is going in this direction. Right, so having the support of or having been involved with entities like ULI and others that we're talking about becomes part of that story. It becomes much easier to digest it if you're a geek and you never really thought about buildings or any sort of IoT kind of things. It just makes the argument much easier. It's just the sequencing of it.
We missed the deadline to submit for this year, so we'd have to take the Sinclairs up on their offer to be a media sponsor, maybe.
Yeah, we're always looking for media sponsors, and I've got a couple ones in Singapore and stuff like that, so we could start reaching out and ask. But again, then do we have the resources to? That was quite a performance you put on at RealCom, like to try and do something like that in Singapore would probably be painful.
Steve, you want to chime in on what you've heard on all of this?
Yeah, so my contribution, having listened to all this and then adding in what David just answered or contributed, is we've bitten off a lot. What we're trying to do here is non-trivial, and it's frankly it's a very different level of effort relative to what we've done in the past. Okay, so if you look at the last 3 years in terms of the the Division 25 stuff, the Smarter Stack and so on, not to say that those weren't valuable contributions, but what we're trying to do here is change an entire architecture for an industry, and do it in such a way that it can be commercialized in an open fashion, so that no one company can sort of own the technology. We're asking a lot of ourselves with a small team to pull this off, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying let's recognize it for what it is. It's non-trivial, and it is going to take not just continued effort on our part, but the more we can attract other individuals who may be on this call today, who may attended the session last week in Florida, to help us. We should seek that help, because I think what we're trying to do here is, like I said, it's non-trivial but highly beneficial. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, so what do we think are the next steps beyond sort of expanding the horizon a little bit, as we've been talking about? What's missing, and continuing to execute, obviously. Thank you, James. We'll be reaching out to you.
Yeah.
Comment.
Well,
There
go
was
ahead,
some.
Trace.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the prototype that was demonstrated, which all of us on this call, on the panel have a clear understanding what that is. I think we need to take it to the next level in terms of what it does, and to the extent that we could get something actually operational in the field in a beta or an alpha type deployment, what is the next step, right, in terms of development? And to me, an alpha deployment would be maybe a goal for us to set for ourselves, where we've got multiple applications running in an IBB, and for now that IBB could be a cloud-based IBB, so we don't have to have any custom hardware. But let's give ourselves a next phase here in the development that we're working towards, so that when we have an opportunity to tell our story to the next group, like what do you call the name of that organization, David? Something urban?
Urban Land Institute.
ULI? Yeah, ULI. Yeah. So let's say that we have an opportunity to meet with them, that we have even a more compelling example to show them, so that it becomes more real and more tangible in telling the story.
If I can add something to that, Steve, I think that's great. And we're now starting to look at July, we start organizing AHR in Orlando. So
Yeah.
what I think you need to do is you need to start picking out titles. You don't need content at this point. You got 6 months to put the content together.
Right.
Think about the titles and the sessions you might want to have in Orlando.
Yep. Tracy, you were going to add something?
Yeah, in regard to next steps, there was some discussion last week about connection profiles and moving on to starting some work with that.
Right.
Trying to organize that piece of it. That by far has the most scale to it, I think, of all of this stuff, because there's literally need for a connection profile for everything that we want to put out there, right?
So maybe I can spend a couple of minutes on just an update on what's going on the IBB project, because that kind of relates to this. We've actually made some interesting sort of progress the last couple of weeks. What we've been working on a number of things, but one of the tasks on the project has actually been to create an installation process for IBBs. So we've been working on that, and I've been testing it together with our DevOps guy. And last week was really sort of the first time that we sent it out to the broader group of the project. We actually had somebody else that actually installed an IBB for the first time that wasn't us. So that was a big deal, and we'll probably see a lot more of that in the next few weeks. So we're starting to see IBBs being able to be installed both in the cloud and increasing. We want it to also be able to be installed in devices and pieces of hardware. So that's one path that's going on in the project. The other path going on in the project is what Tracy mentioned, which is the creation of a number of connection profiles. And we started doing that by thinking about how to structure and what kind of connection profiles we needed. So we sort of came up with a structure and a sort of a strategy on how to name them and how to think about the different profiles. And Matt Holler from Intellimation has been leading a lot of that work and a lot of that thinking, and so is a number of other people from other companies. So that's really good. And the other parts of the project is the creation of the open source broker and the connection of the interfaces of how different applications will actually talk to IBB. All of that's being refined. So we're making a lot of progress on the technical front. And also in the connection profile, which is, while it's technical, it's really to do with the use cases and how the value is actually going to be extracted. And we now have this BIM model, which is an amazing thing because it creates a framework where we can plug things in. So I think we shouldn't really underestimate the BIM side of things. And one of the thoughts that the group was actually thinking about in Tampa last week, we were having a sort of a post session meeting, is maybe we should to what extent, I put it as a question, should we focus on the BIM side of things, potentially bringing that to AHR as being something that will actually change the conversation of how we think about these smart technologies, make it much more of a BIM thing. Anybody have any thoughts?
My thoughts are, the one problem with BIM is it's so big and so complex that you very quickly, as soon as you click off the screen and go into the BIM environment, it's another world, and your head's kind of spinning, and you've kind of forgot where you came from. And the whole purpose of this is to take you to new worlds, and I think it's so easy to get lost in that BIM world. So that's just my shot from the hip.
That's true. I think that's maybe a more sort of conventional view of BIM. And you're definitely right. That's how I think of BIMs. It's kind of a big, massive, complex thing. But the sort of the BIM that Kimon is basically proposing that we use, that we're actually using, is actually just a subset, because we don't care about sort of the construction side of BIM. We don't care about the facade material and all that kind of stuff, where most of BIM does. And so we just care about the data side of things in terms of what's actually the equipment and the layout, the general layout. So it's actually, that's one of the things that we get out of focusing on BIM, is sort of understanding, the difference between the different types of BIM. It's just not just one big BIM.
I think we have to be careful in that, trying to explain that, you kind of get lost. Our message is complex as it is, and so you take your complex message and you lay it on top of something even more complex, basically an active digital twin. And if we keep it simple. The other thing I thought is when you were doing the BIM demos, bringing up the floor plates and stuff, chairs and things, that we definitely need examples that would be something our industry could relate to. We kept asking for mechanical, can we see what the chiller looks like? And no, that's not there. So we need to prototype some of that stuff.
Yeah, we were trying to do the same, but we couldn't get in time. We couldn't get any BIMs that actually had sensible equipment to it. That was purely a time limitation.
I think I've said this before. I'm a little nervous about affiliating or associating or becoming associated too tightly with the BIM platform, BIM technology. I don't even know what the right word is to call that, to be honest. In that that we become seen as a way to enable BIM. And yes, we want an outcome like that, but that is, to me, that is not the direction that I saw this going. So.
Yeah, I saw that the graphics that are coming are way too complex. I mean, we have developed our own graphics for a reason, because our graphics have to look more like PowerPoints than they do actual rooms, because they have to have so much information on them, and then they have to have the overlaid dynamic information on them. So I saw that too. It's like the BIM was able to contain my thoughts rather than leave my thoughts completely open to something that I just saw yesterday could actually be part of IBB.
I think we'll do a better job going forward here of showing how the data from our industry can be made useful to the planners, the owners, the maintainers, and even the people who tear down a building. But making our data more valuable. In other words, having more places to sell our data, relevant throughout the life cycle of a building, is what we're trying to get people to use their imaginations for. We admittedly have not quite figured out the way to make those imaginations open up to be able to see the fact that we're going to make our data more valuable to the life cycle.
Okay, we are well past our time. been watching the clocks as closely. So we need to bring this to a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for all of your comments. Thanks, the audience, and we'll get the video up, and we'll meet you next week again for another month of Monday Live. Bye-bye, all.
See y'all.